Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the conversation today. We are going to talk about how management auxiliary consumption save the environment. Welcome to the people that arrived sometime. So something that I want to mention today is that if you want to follow me by LinkedIn, you can follow me there in my account, or you can follow me in my web page www.monicawaymarin.com. So, why today we are going to talk about this important subject? Something that we have to realize is that when we think about a, a power plant, about 10% of the power of the power station is designated to auxiliary consumption. It is critical to understand that, for example, when we think about different processes, we have, for instance, the conveyor belts for coal feeding, not just for coal feeding, but as well for limestone, for instance. So, and here I have maybe the photo is not the best. Well, a photo of coal crushing. When we think about conveyor belts and coach crushing, it comes to my mind different stories when I was a young engineer working, for example, in regarding the crushing station. I remember a particular time that I was very young in the company and I was walking up to the top of the silo. So the coal was crushed in the crushing station or the crusher, and it was a long conveyor belt to go up to the top of the silo, about 80 meters above the level of the ground level. So I was walking through the conveyor belt step by step. I arrived completely exhausted. It was a long way to go. It was so steep as well. So it was a headache that time. Early on my career is that the sound of bearings and rollers indicates premature failures, specifically on large conveyor belts. And so it was so notorious in conveyor belts that moves 24 by 7 all days on the week. That and sometimes they have repetitive sounds of the bearings and rollers, and there are these sounds. There are a good indication of malfunction. Something we realize of that is that the power consumption of that conveyor belts was as well impacted. So there is something that is pretty important to understand the situation and try to establish the baseline. When we think so regarding the crushing station, I am going to tell you about the crushing station in a coal mine, the very big one. So I remember working in that big mine that usually the coal was fed to the big crushing machine. So, and it used to be crushing not just for coal, but also for mineral material that is basically rock, very hard rock. And one time it was something special. It was a completely stoppage of the crushing. Did cause that more than 50 teeth fall down into the coal. So it was due to a very hard rock, and many of these teeth arrived to the final call user. That was a nightmare. Everybody was worried. We have to make all the traceability, how to identify how much It was fit in different particular shipment to indicate the customer possible damage on their equipments equipment when they received that deed. So it was a big issue. But on top of that, we also realized as part of the quality assurance programs that most of the customers, the top 1%, so the top one of the claims for the coal company was regarding rock content in the coal, but not just simple rock content, big lumps of rock that cause a lot of problems in their facilities. So, in that regard, many people in the coal mine realize how rocks really impact the customer facilities and the importance on trying to reduce the particle size as much as possible to reduce problems on customer facilities. So when we think about coal, when you are in a coal power station and you receive the coal, large chunks of coal or rock into your crushing stations can cause a lot of damage regarding maintenance, regarding operational costs, and regarding power consumption. So this is so important to identify regarding coal crushing. What is the type of material you are receiving from your coal provider and how to handle in the best way possible to reduce the power consumption you have in the coal crushing. When we go to the right side of the slide, you can see the compressors. Why I want to talk about compressors? Why is so important the service and the instrumentation air? Both kind of air are very useful for the normal processes around a power station. So you need that for variety of applications, including control systems and instrumentation, as well for services. You need a lot of air for moving, for example, limestone. So you have to think as well how to operate the compressors in an efficient way. So an example I want to mention regarding this particular situation is that we realize in a coal power station that we have a higher increase of the heat rate continuously. We were monitoring mainly the boiler, we were monitoring mainly the turbine, but we forget a little bit about the auxiliary power consumption. Something that we have to realize as well is the need to implement ways to control the uh, auxiliary power consumption. And something that we realize is the consumption of power of the compressor systems. Once we evaluate, we realize that according with the manufacturer conditions, we should operate with 7 compressors, but actually we were working with 8 compressors. So we have to study what happened in the compressors, do a performance test, and realize that we should decrease the use of 1 compressor to go to 7 compressors and reduce the power consumption. So how we realize that? Because we have a higher power consumption of the compressors, higher than the values expected by the manufacturer, and we realized that we need to have a benchmark. So the benchmark for us was going to the manufacturer conditions. And once we go there to run the compressors for service air and instrumentation air to the manufacturer conditions, we were able to reduce the consumption of power. So we realize that we save some energy as well for improving the compressor operation and performance. So other important consumption in a power station is all the primary and secondary fans for air consumption. This is one of the highest consumers of power energy in a power station. Their fans are crucial to maintain the proper air circulation within the boiler. So when we think about primary and secondary fans, primary fans are also responsible for supplying the air to the combustion process, and secondary fans assist various cooling and ventilation tasks. So we have to try to maintain these fans in the best condition possible because they are pretty sensitive to power consumption, and we want to reduce power consumption, but you need to involve as well on the conditions of that fans and also on how they perform in the best way possible. Going back to my experience as well. So I remember when I was in a power station. So one of our relevant points to try to consider improving boiler efficiency was the relevance of optimized air-fuel relationship or ratio to improve boiler combustion and reducing oxygen excess. This condition makes us to focus on different conditions like power consumption of the fans, performance of the fans, and also performance of the boiler. We have to integrate different processes in order to realize that we need to emphasize to reduce the power consumption of the primary and secondary fans to reduce the waste of energy or waste of power in that particular equipment. Side of the presentation of the slide that you have in front of you, something that I want also to mention, or for me is also important, is realize the importance of the cooling tower fans, motors, and speed drivers. Why is so important? As well as the fans or the cold mills or the crushers, this equipment is one of the major consumers of power in a power station. Cooling towers are employed to remove all the excess heat generated during the power generation process. That is more than 60% in most of the cases. So if you are efficient on that process, for sure you are improving the heat rate. But you are not just improving the heat rate for improving the operation of the cooling tower. But once you realize that you can reduce as well the power consumption of the fans, motors, and speed drives on the equipment related with the cooling tower, you realize that this is one of the most important and essential elements to work on for improving the performance of a power station. So it is important to realize that, for example, I have the experience to reduce up to 5 degrees Celsius in a power station by trying to check the amount of air and try to adjust the variable speed of improved cooling tower system, assuring the optimal performance. In that way, we also reduce the power consumption of the fans, and we also reduce the power consumptions of the entire system. But you have to focus as well ensure that you can minimize the impact of power consumption in the auxiliary equipment and reduce your impact on the environment. So something that you have to think as well is try to monitor that in the proper way because optimizing auxiliary consumption not just involve the monitoring and adjusting the systems, but it also include implementing of technologies to reduce energy usage, enhancing system control, and adopting the best practices for each component. So before before finishing our session today, I want to talk about how you can optimize auxiliary consumption. First of all, establish a baseline. Just try to think about the manufacturer performance and similar operations. Second, monitoring. Monitoring is key to establish the different regulations, the different variables, and to understand how is the process going regarding power consumption, especially for the auxiliaries. Third, work on performance tests for different processes. Once you work on the performance test, you can go to the four steps that is adjust. And finally, you are able to reduce emissions in your company.